What's up, this is Apex Mike, and today we're going to be going over all the best settings for Apex Legends on your Nintendo Switch Lite. A lot of these settings are going to help you be more successful, get more kills, and get more wins in Apex Legends. But before we dive in, please consider subscribing. I'm starting to do tips and tricks videos specifically for Apex Legends on the Nintendo Switch Lite, and I'll be continuing to post gameplay as well. But enough of that, let's get into the settings. Alright guys, here we are at the login screen. The first thing I want you to do is just take your right joystick and I want you to push that in. And this is going to bring up the different data centers that you can connect to. What I'm going to suggest you do, even if the ping is insanely high, is go to the Tokyo servers and pick whichever one is low. So for me, that's Tokyo GCE1. So I'm going to hit accept there, and then I will log into Apex Legends. So next up, folks, I want you to head over to the actual settings here in the game menu. And the first thing I want you to do is we're going to turn off cross-platform. So this is by default enabled, and you want to hit disable. And the reason we're doing that is we want to be able to be on the Tokyo servers, which are populated with a lot of Nintendo Switch players. So it's been my experience that not only are you going to get games in Nintendo Switch lobbies only, but you're going to have a lot more success because you're playing against other players that only have 30 frames per second versus other people who could be on Xbox or PS4 that are running the game at 60 frames per second or more. Do not underestimate the difference that makes. That said, let's move on, guys. We got some other settings to look at here. So for the first part here, we got button layout, stick layout. Most of this, it can all just stay the same unless you really want it to change. Menu cursor speed. Now this is something that should really be bumped up for whatever reason with Nintendo Switch. They've put your menu cursor speed all the way down. I'd put it at least 50% or higher. This is going to help you toggle through those death boxes and make sure you get the items that you need before your next fight, or you end up third-partied. That said, something else that's very popular to change is look sensitivity and look ADS, or aim down sights. I would start at the default 3 and 3, and then slowly start to increase that. If you have your look sensitivity jacked up to 5 or 6 and you're just starting the game, you're not going to be able to hit the broadside of a barn. So keep it low to start and then slowly increase it. But moving on here, we also have the response curve. You can start on classic or work your way up to linear. Again, like the look sensitivity, this is going to come down to your skill in the game. Currently, I have it on steady. So if you're a more experienced player, you might want to put it up to fine aim, or even high velocity. And the last thing we want to do here is turn off the HD rumble. That's really only going to come into play if you're using a Pro controller, but it's just something that's going to distract you if you are. Now with the Nintendo Switch Lite, you can use motion controls, but I would suggest that you just turn this off. Basically how this can work is that if you tilt your Nintendo Switch Lite forward while you're shooting, then that helps you control your recoil. Plus, you can actually move your Nintendo Switch Lite to the left or right if you want your legend in the game to look left or right. It's a pretty interesting addition for the Nintendo Switch Lite in particular, as well as the Nintendo Switch handheld. But ultimately, if you're serious about the game, go ahead and try it in the training grounds, but I don't think it's something you're going to want to use. Alright guys, so let's move on to some gameplay settings. The first one that is super important when you're playing on a Nintendo Switch Lite is the interact prompt style. You're going to want to make that compact. This is basically anything that's displayed on your screen, and obviously with a small screen to start with on the Switch Lite. The next one here, button hints, you might want to turn that off if you're coming from, say, PlayStation or Xbox. That can certainly get confusing. I wouldn't worry about switching up your crosshair damage feedback, but damage numbers, I would suggest turning those off. We don't have a lot of real estate on the Nintendo Switch Lite screen, and those numbers can be really distracting. That might just be a personal preference for me, so go ahead and make your own decision on that one. I wouldn't worry about the ping, obituaries, or minimap. Keep those all the same. Always make sure you have your weapon auto cycle on empty. It's just going to automatically reload your weapon. And here's another one specifically for the Nintendo Switch Lite. I love to have auto sprint on. Let's be honest, on the Nintendo Switch Lite, the joysticks aren't that great, and needing to press them in every time you want to sprint just isn't something you want to do. But that's going to do it for my suggestions when it comes to gameplay. Let's move on over to video. When it comes to sprint view shake, I think minimum is absolutely the best here. Again, with the smaller screen on the Switch Lite and it being a competitive game, you just want as few distractions as possible. And something else that's really important when it comes to playing on the Nintendo Switch Lite, it's your brightness. Make sure that you have this turned up quite a bit and that it's turned up on your console. I just find that this really helps me spot enemies farther out and see into those darker areas. Ultimately, this is going to come down to personal preference, but again, on the Switch Lite, I think higher brightness is going to help you. Moving on now to the audio settings, this is really going to be your own personal preference. I've disabled my voice chat, and that's mostly because I want to make videos that don't include comments from other randos that I'm playing with. But hey guys, that's all the settings I got for you today. Let me know in the comments below if there's anything you would add to my list, and I'll leave you here with a little bit of gameplay. So hopefully you enjoyed that gameplay. If so, hit that subscribe button. There'll be lots of that coming. And as always, I'm Mike, and may your games of Apex be legendary.